Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Red Gaming Telecom video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. And we're going to start things out with Nvidia, and the rumours of the refreshed RTX 20 series persist. Two new articles have actually emerged, one from WCCFtech, the second from Tweaktown. Tweaktown gives us an update to what we heard yesterday. In fact, Amy covered that there would be two new GPUs in the 20 series. They would essentially have faster memory frequencies compared to the current SKUs we have now. But Tweaktown says that no, it's not going to be two SKUs, it's actually going to be three. So we will see a revamped version, a super version if you will, of the RTX 2060, 2070 and finally 2080 cards. So, what about the RTX 2080 Ti? According to their information, no, not yet. Apparently, Nvidia are pretty happy with the 2080 Ti performance right now. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future they do launch a faster memory variant of the 2080 Ti, but right now it does not look like that's going to happen. However, WCCFtech also tells us that there will be price cuts for the current lineup as well, and this will extend when they eventually just replace the 2060, 2070, 2080 with the super variants. Price cut is actually pretty significant. The 2060 is going to be about $250. For $400 you can get the 2070, and for the princely sum of $600 you will be able to pick up the RTX 2080. While the performance increase is tantalizing, particularly if you've not upgraded yet, to me the big thing here is actually the price cuts. Clearly this is Nvidia feeling the pressure for AMD soon to launch Navi, with the RX 5700 allegedly being up to 10% faster than the RTX 2070. Although I will put a massive asterisk there and remind everyone that it is Strange Brigade, and AMD do enjoy typically a rather nice performance advantage with that game, so whether this is going to be representative of a larger number of titles, so whether we see that from Vulkan titles such as Doom and Wolfenstein, down to DirectX 12 titles like Gears of War, and of course DirectX 11 titles like Assassin's Creed, we just don't know yet. But either way, obviously the price cuts are only going to benefit us as consumers. Navi is supposedly going to be unveiled a lot more during E3, and this is also supposedly the time that Nvidia are going to launch these new cards. I don't think that this is any coincidence at all. Obviously, Nvidia want to take all of the wind out of AMD's sails, so hopefully AMD will be ultra aggressive with the pricing strategy for Navi, and obviously that means only benefit us as consumers. Switching things now to AMD news, and we have a couple of updates concerning the Ryzen 3000 series, and then we have a rather large update concerning Navi 10 and Navi 20. The first thing, and this is good news, is that Ryzen 3000 is confirmed by AMD themselves, more specifically Robert Hallock, to be soldered. This isn't actually that much of a surprise, given previous Ryzen CPUs had been soldered, so there's no toothpaste. You don't have to worry about the toothpaste, which, assuming they do a semi-decent job, means you don't have to delid the CPU. Obviously, if it is not soldered and they use crappy thermal paste, then you can delid, and like people do with like the 8700K or whatever. But hopefully, we will see really nice really nice temperatures with the next generation Ryzen. AMD are also teasing that it's going to overclock extremely well, and allegedly during E3, the Horizon event, we will learn more about overclocking on the Ryzen 3000 series CPUs. We've also learned from different forums, including Chip Hell, who allegedly have quite a lot of experience now on engineering sample silicon, that in theory anyway, 5 GHz may be possible with single core speeds, but they do say that at the moment the chips are performing really well, even at stock, let alone with a mild overclock. Now we have some bad news, and this concerns anyone who is considering grading their CPU only. So for example, if you have an X370 board or a B450 and are thinking to yourself, awesome, I'm just going to plonk in a new Ryzen 3000 CPU and enjoy that sweet PCIe 4 goodness. Well, maybe not. According to Robert Hallock, they actually made an error that they are correcting. Pre-X570 boards will not support PCIe 4. There is no guarantee that older motherboards can reliably run the more stringent signaling requirements of Gen 4, and we simply cannot have a mix of yes, no and maybe in the market for all over motherboards. The potential for confusion is, quote, too high. The final BIOSes will be released for 3rd generation Ryzen, which will be a GASA 1000 Plus, and Gen 4 will not be an option anymore. We wish we could have enabled this, but the risk is just too great. I personally feel, and I'm curious to hear what you believe on this one, so please leave your thoughts down in the comments below whether you feel that this is a good decision or not. Now, in terms of discrete GPUs, I don't think it's a big deal. Even if you have an RTX 2080 Ti, running PCIe 3 at ×8, it does impact performance. I'm not going to give you a bunch of BS. It does impact performance, but it's not terrible. You know, depending on the title and the resolution and the CPU, the effects are either pretty marginal to, okay, not the best thing, but not that big of a deal. Obviously, if you start dropping down though, and you've got like PCIe 1, then clearly that's a completely different story. So PCIe 4 is not going to be that big of a deal for now in discrete graphics. However, when it comes to other things like storage devices, obviously more bandwidth equal good. And secondly, it was kind of, well, confirmed that this would be a thing. AMD did always say it was going to be down to the motherboard manufacturer, and I think that's what they should stick with. I think that they should say it is not down to them, it's down to the motherboard vendor, you know, and then go from there. My personal feelings are that there's going to be a lot of hacks and BIOS hacks for this, because after all, some motherboards we've seen, they already support it, right? It's already technically there. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people will just, well, they're just going to mod the BIOS. That's my personal opinion. I don't really like the fact that AMD said that this would happen. I understand about the signaling stuff. This was actually a concern I raised when I first broke the fact that PCIe 4 was going to be backwards compatible on the older boards. Yeah, it just kind of feels sucky that this feature is not going to be present anymore. And I don't think it's going to impact a lot of people right now. It's just kind of annoying that it's not going to happen. With that said, you know, we'll have to wait and see whether Ryzen 3000 CPUs perform as well on, let's say, a B350 motherboard anyway. And by that, I mean overclocking and, you know, all of the normal stuff for the older boards. So yeah, I mean, we know that the A320 doesn't work with Ryzen 3000, so if you had that board, one of those boards, you'd have to upgrade anyway. But I guess it's some people are speculating that this is pressure from motherboard vendors. I don't think that that's the case. I do think that AMD are just trying to make things simple, but I personally believe that this is just going too far, and I think that they should have continued how they originally planned. So there's a really fascinating article that has actually emerged on Sweclockers, which are, well, I'm going to shock you, they're a Swedish website. It's actually a really cool website, and they have sources that have whispered to them that Navi 10 is actually a mixture of GCN and RDNA. RDNA, by the way, is the next generation architecture, at least according to AMD, that is Navi. So Navi 10 will be a mixture of GCN. I'll go into the technical stuff in just a moment, but Navi 20 will be different. Navi 20 will be pure RDNA. Navi 10 is once again about replacing the mainstream. So that's the $500 or lower. But Navi 20 will be more towards the enthusiast market. So it will be replacing Radeon 7. According to their information, therefore, Navi 10 will be a mixture of RDNA and also GCN, which is now pretty old. I mean, GCN's been going, 10-ish years, I think? Whereas Navi 20 will purely be RDNA. According to what we know about Navi 10 and the RDNA architecture so far, they are telling us that it will be up to 1.25 or 25% faster per core clock. So what that means is if you have the same number of stream processors with the same clock frequency, so let's just say you have 2560 stream processors and you're running that at 1 gigahertz, it's going to be 25% faster with all other things being equal with Navi versus Vega. And they're also telling us it's up to 50% performance per watt increase, which is actually quite significant. I imagine that's going to be rather handy for consoles. And there's also a complete new compute unit redesign, multi-level cache hierarchy, and also streamlined graphics pipeline. So the pixel pushing power of Navi, as well as geometry performance, have increased significantly. That's one of the things that allegedly was the primary focus to be fixed with Navi 10, to basically get that level of performance on par. So with these rumours then, we're left with a couple of possibilities. The first is that Sweclockers are just wrong, that there isn't that much of an architectural difference between Navi 10 and Navi 20. Another possibility is that it's not incorrect. If that's the case, it makes me wonder what difference is there between Navi 20 and the next gen GPU, which we've seen on the roadmaps. So either next gen is being pushed back, because from what I remember, next gen is, penciled in roughly for 2020. But why would AMD launch Navi 20 if it's a full RDNA architecture and then launch next gen? So possibly Navi 20 is next gen? That's just pure speculation. And then there's also the patents that we've seen online. Unfortunately, they're patents. So one, they don't actually mean much because they could never come into a real product. They could just be patented, but then for whatever technical reason, they just don't do it. But there are two patents. The first is the Super SIMD patent, which basically takes the GCN architecture that we all know, we all love, and then changes it a little bit by having some stuff in there for VLIW. That's possibly Navi 10 or Navi 20, but then we also have a more Nvidia-like patent as well. And so I wonder if that's some type of evolution. Although because you've also got the consoles, possibly one of these patents revolves around a console, but generally speaking, I would imagine that if it's a custom design, Sony or Microsoft would have that patent. So speculation is that Navi 10 or Navi 20 could relate to one of those patents that we've seen, or possibly it is next generation. So it's just really curious what AMD are actually planning for its roadmap, and perhaps that's the takeaway here. On stage, Lisa Su told us that the RX 5700 series, Navi 10, would be the first cards from the company which would be based on RDNA, Radeon DNA. However, a couple of times, unofficially admittedly, AMD have referenced Navi as being GCN. The first was a driver update for Linux. Clearly, we can see GCN and Navi being referenced right next to one another. The second time is an employee of AMD, who let slip that Navi is GCN, but the next generation of GPU would indeed be a different architecture. And don't forget, when referencing next generation, they are referring to the architecture, not the performance, not the size of the GPU or anything else. They are simply referring to the actual evolution of the architecture. And we've been looking at next generation and thinking, well, it must be a successor to Navi, but maybe instead it is Navi 20. Looking back at those patents, the two patents, one is Super SIMD, which references VLIW, and the second is a more Nvidia-like design, as I mentioned, which means that it's better able to bypass buffers, and basically each stream processor is capable of acting more independently, more efficiently, more power efficient. but it also has many other advantages. That does sound kind of next generation to me, but who knows? Perhaps the patents are a red herring. Don't forget that the original rumour was that Sony helped fund Navi. But then AMD actually said no, Navi development, or RDNA development more accurately, started before Sony's involvement. So another possibility is Sony helped fund something to do with RDNA. That could be ray tracing or something entirely different. I'm very curious to see how all of this actually pans out, and even when Navi launches, like the RX 5700, we'll actually finally get a decent block diagram of the actual GPU. Hopefully, though, we learn more about that after E3, so we can start to actually figure out what GPU we're actually dealing with here, how much different it is between GCN, and then hopefully we'll learn more about Navi 20 in the not too distant future. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Normal stuff if you have. Like, share, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.